Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Create an Outcome-Focused Community Journey, brought to you by Technology and Services Industry Association and sponsored by Higher Logic Vanilla. My name is Vanessa Lucero, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded. A link to the recording of today's presentation will be sent to you within 24 hours via email. Audio will be delivered via streaming. All attendees will be in a listen-only mode, and your webinar controls, including volume, are found in the toolbar at the bottom of the webinar player. We encourage your comments and questions. If you think of a question for the speakers at any point, please submit through the Ask a Question box on the top left corner of the webinar player, and we will open it up for a verbal Q&A portion at the end of today's session. Lastly, feel free to enlarge the slides to full screen at any time by selecting one of the full screen button options, which are located on the top right corner of the slide player. I would now like to introduce our speakers today. John Ragsdale, Distinguished Researcher and Vice President of Technology Ecosystems for TSIA, and Adrian Speyer, Head of Community for Higher Logic Vanilla. As with all of our TSIA webinars, we do have a lot of exciting content to cover in the next 45 minutes, so let's jump right in and get started. John, over to you.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We've got a great topic for you, how to create an outcome-focused community journey. And TSIA has really published a lot of content over the last few years about moving to becoming an outcome-focused sales organization, success organization, how pricing models are changing, and there is a huge role that community has in really making tech companies realize this journey. So Adrian and I have done a lot of webinars previously focusing on how communities really can drive adoption and also expand selling. But today we're going to focus in on the land and renew. I've got to put the obligatory layer slide. It is a TSI webinar. So these are two areas we haven't really talked as much about, but there's definitely a role that communities can play. And this whole concept of customer journeys is becoming really hot right now. 58% of companies have executed a customer journey mapping exercise. I'm hoping that number keeps going up because that means quite a few of you still haven't done that. But we do know that community has a critical role to play in every step of the customer journey and helping customers really do peer support, see how other people are doing things, problem solving from a support perspective. So thrilled to have Adrian with us here today to share his wisdom. And I also want to point out that Adrian has just published a new book, How to Create, or The Accidental Community Manager, A Guide to Building a Successful B2B Community. Adrian, congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll send you the money in the mail soon.
Okay, checks in the mail. Well, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here, everyone. Thank you so much for the intro. And I'm always so happy to be here with my friends at the TSIA to talk about my favorite topic, which is community. And I think, as you were saying, John, the obligatory layer slide when it comes to TSIA, I always have an obligatory slide myself, which is what is community. And the reason I do that is I always find there seems to be some confusion, or rather, the word community gets thrown out a lot. I hear it all the time where I'm like, they really mean an audience, So I want to kind of give people, kind of a framework to work within to understand what community is. Now, I certainly could give you a definition in Oxford, and you could go look it up in Merriam-Webster, but I'd rather tell you basically the 4 ways that you can define when something is a community. And I personally think it's more practical so that it'll kind of make it really clear when we're talking about the types of communities that we're going to be talking about today as well. So the first is that there's some shared space for people to gather and connect. And in this case, because we're talking online community, obviously it's online. But the idea is that there's some kind of gathering area or some sort of thing. And I should mention that all of these items need to kind of be an element of the community existing, because I find like when I was having 1 or 2, and then it's like you have a group of folks that love sports cars, for example, on Facebook. That's not a community because it hasn't satisfied all the things that are there. So then the second thing that you want to look at is that people share a common language, a jargon, customs, interests, or passions. Those words only community people would know. So, quote unquote, the inside joke, something that, if you said gearheads, or, if you're really into pickleball or whatever those things are, there are certain words that only individuals that participate in the community would understand, and an outsider would think that you're speaking a foreign language. So the understanding is that there's some kind of commonality and ability through that. The third part, and I think this is the one thing where I guess people get confused community with audience, is that people are sharing with one another voluntarily and among themselves in the space. So it's essentially about giving and taking, and hopefully giving more than you take. And the idea is, like, for example, I've seen this before, like Coke will talk about their audience. Their community, but it's really an audience, or consumers that are drinking Coca-Cola. They're not a community. Like, they're not, people that are drinking Coke aren't sharing recipes on using Coke. They're drinking Coke, and that's not a community. And then finally, there's and I think the most important essence, and I, like I said, all these items are important, is that there's a sense of belonging. So in this group, there is that sense that if you were to say to them, hey, are you part of this group? Does this group exist? Then they're able to say, yes, I'm part of this community. Like, there's a self-awareness, and they have that genuine interest in sharing and learning and assisting one another. So when something meets these 4 criterias, we're talking about a space which is a community. And this is what I'm going to mean going forward when I talk about community, specifically the branded community. And I've talked about the difference between branded community and social media community. And branded community, or online community, or owned community, essentially it's the same idea, is that you are creating a space within your platform, be it that hosted by a third party or on your own servers, that's a place where people can gather, share in various ways. And we'll go all through that. But today, specifically about journey, we're going to talk about the key to creating that journey from prospect all the way to customers, including all the renewals and all that fun stuff that John kind of mentioned at the beginning. So today we're going to head on a journey, because everyone loves journeys. And we're going to tackle it in these 4 buckets that I kind of wanted to think about, which is, first off, obviously the acquisition, and talking about how can community help prospects learn about your business and the solutions that you offer. Then we're going to talk about conversion, which is, what impact can community have on converting those prospects or people that are out there looking into customers. Third, we're going to talk about retention, which is, where can community programs create ways for customers to be happy and keep returning and finding value in what you're building. And then finally, we're going to talk about loyalty, which is, talking about how your community can assist in moving customers from just beyond being members to brand advocates or promoters, being out there, spreading the good word, as they say, about your brand. So with that, we're going to jump on into the first of the items, which is acquisition. And we're going to have some time to kind of break it down. So the way that I did this was talk about some key considerations, and then I'll give you an example, and then some ways that you can take action with your own way. And then I'll jump to John at various points to get his take on relevant spots for the TSIA research, as it may be. So the first thing about acquisition, I think that everyone here can agree with, is that everyone wants to talk about, or a major concern in acquisition is getting those that may have a problem, that they're out there, they're like, I have an issue, or I'm having some challenge, is to be aware or let people know that who have a problem to know that you are the solution that solves it. So how can we get people to know about you? And part of that starts with having some kind of public, controllable footprint, even if it's partially open, right? To have that conversation that people can see and find and look into it. And another, key consideration that we have to think about too is it's about language. And I know this always happens, I've seen it way too often. Well, people have a conversation and they'll be corrected by the marketing or the marketing team, right? To correct it into marketing speak. Oh, well, that's not the correct way that our product is called, or, there should be a dash here, or it's capitalized, what have you. But I get it. Brand marks are very important, but you also have to understand how people are searching and talking about your product, and you don't want to overcorrect. And there's this tendency I find sometimes that, sometimes organizations will get a bit too much into how the customers are talking amongst themselves within the community, and they'll correct the wording. And in that case, they're actually hurting themselves from an SEO perspective. And I want to talk about SEO because, I know that there's been a lot of talk about, TikTok being used as search and all this kind of thing. We haven't seen that in the B2B space. Like, it's still, SEO is a significant amount of traffic. As a matter of fact, just as an example, like one of our customers, in just 2 years, the community directly contributed to a 108% increase in their SEO traffic. Most communities see between a 10 to 30% increase and up to 50% of traffic coming just from search engines. And when we did a study in 2020 that Vanilla put together, we found that 72% said the branded community led to an increase of website traffic. So we know that community has a really important aspect into that. And part of that is making sure that you're talking to the consumer in their language and allowing them to talk in that way. So I want to jump in with an example. This is one of my favorite, to be honest, which is Smartsheet. If people are not familiar with them, they're an application that you can do all kinds of wonderful things. But I think what's really smart about it is they're focused on product in this community, but also about project management. So it's a natural spot for people that are learning about those, are trying to solve those project management challenges. And at the same time, they have a way that they're also able to introduce their tools. So if you're out there on Google and you're searching about project management or tools and how to organize, they've set up their community as a way to begin that conversation. So that they have different content. Sorry, I should have gone forward in this so you could kind of see it. So as you see, they have areas to explore that you can kind of go in there and see different content, have the different journeys. Are you coming there just to learn about their product, but also the opportunity to up level your skill and have those conversations with fellow individuals using spreadsheets or how-tos or guides and templates. So that's what we're talking about in terms of, getting that acquisition happening, is they're putting their best foot forward by creating this kind of like a center of excellence in sense of this particular topic, and not necessarily centered around the product, although the product is still prevalent in the community, but it's an opportunity to become an expert on the actual product itself and the domain to which the product is serving. And so that's an example that I was talking about where, if someone's having a problem, they would naturally fall into this community and you know what, Smartsheet may be a solution to solve this challenge that I'm having about organization or getting projects done in a timely manner. So with that, what I want to say is, okay, how can you today take action for you with a community and make acquisition a central aspect of that? So the first thing, and this is somewhat controversial, I know, for a lot of folks, is to make sure that you have public areas for people to discover. I know that there's this tendency to we want to hide everything. And yes, you know what, I'm all for, there's certain content that you need to hide from the fact that you may have very customer specific things that are there. But I'd also look at whatever domain that you're in, from security software to accounting to what have you, there is an opportunity to create a space of general knowledge that people could use to have those conversations and use that as an opportunity for people to learn about you and your brand when they're doing those searches on Google. So it's really an important aspect of having that conversation. There's no software that I'm aware of, at least at the enterprise level, that is of any seriousness, that wouldn't allow you to have some areas of private and public. And I'll get into why having public is important in just a moment. But I mean, the short story of it is people want to see how those conversations are happening. And if you hide everything, they don't have a way to find that information, and they'll go somewhere else to get it. But we'll talk about that in another section. The other thing that I want to point out is that you need to treat this channel as equal or above your social. It's really funny how I find you'll go on someone like a really big brand's website, and at the bottom they have their Facebook, their Twitter, their Instagram, and their community is something so hidden that you can't even find. And I've always found that kind of strange, that you as a brand wouldn't want someone on your own platform where you have ability to get access to all the data and connect into your CRM with what they're doing on the community. You'd rather they go off to a third-party community platform or social media platform and not have any access to the data and have no way to know what's going on and have some insights in that. So, from an acquisition point of view, it's a no-brainer to really want to drive people into that funnel. Third is, the fact that they're on your platform, you have that opportunity to pay special attention to the data that's coming in and look at content gaps. Like if you're seeing that there's a lot of searches happening and people are coming to your community looking for, let's say, a project management template or some kind of solution, there's an opportunity now for you to create this content and use that as a lead magnet into the community. And yeah, it's not a bad thing to talk about lead magnets and community. It's just about how you do it properly. But creating those discussions around the things that you're seeing people are searching for, it's a natural spot to do it. And then finally, and I can't stress this enough, do not overcorrect customer language. The only time that a community person should be going in, or any company should be correcting, is if the conversation title is help, which is not of any help to anyone. But if they're, if they've worded, the product a bit weird or something of this nature, be very mindful that you want to not overcorrect it too much and cause the fact that people will not be able to find it, because there are just different ways that people call things, and that's just the nature of it. And if you try to overcorrect it, they will not find it, and they'll end up somewhere else that you don't want them to. And that's kind of the whole point. If you need to do a correction, you can reply to the conversation and say, hey, by the way, internally we call it this, or this is the proper way. But I would leave as much as you can the customer language as much as possible, because that's how people are going to find what they're looking for. So within our journey, of course, acquisition is very important, and then we enter into the conversion phase, right? Which I think a lot of people look at as that, penultimate kind of thing that we want, right? Which is money, I guess, is right. Most people would consider, but it could be subscription or what have you. And there's some really good survey data that we've gotten over the years, and I've footnoted all this research that we've done in some of the insights that we're aware of. So first off, I think what's really important to recognize is that buyers only spend about 17% of their time meeting with potential suppliers. So it's going to be about the things they see out there about you or they discover, kind of like that dark area, right? So you're thinking about 83% of the information they're going to find out about you is stuff that you're not even going to be aware of. So whatever that is out there in the world is how they're going to make the decision if they're going to actually convert into being a customer. And then we, in our own research, when we did the survey, went out and asked buyers. Now, these aren't our customers. We went out and asked technology buyers about when they're going to do research before signing a contract. What are some of the things that they look at? And 98% of them told us that a search, doing their own research was what they started with. And they're out there doing searches on Google and Bing and other places, right, before they're coming to you. So it's kind of like, well, what are they going to end up on and see about your company before they sign that contract? And then the other thing that we found was they're also likely to seek out the opinions of other users. So we found that 64% of these potential customers, so these people that are going to convert for you, are trusting their peers over your brand. And it's kind of funny, like only 9% disagreed, which is kind of funny. I thought it'd be like 0. We live in a time where everyone's kind of not believing anyone. And 29% had no preference. So if you're going to think about it from that point of view, there's 30 plus 64, it's like 94% of people are not trusting you, essentially, or if they do, it's kind of like in between. But obviously the majority of people want to hear from other folks. And this gets back to what I was talking about, that public area where people are having conversations around your brand and talking about it as what they're going to trust more. I've talked with friends about this, especially with the book. Like people don't buy things without reviews, right? Like when you go to Amazon, you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to buy this, but let me look and see what people are talking about. And that is a big swear. I mean, there's a reason why they have that button on Amazon saying, was this review helpful? And, you have that opportunity with your own platform to have those conversations on there and kind of be part of the conversation rather than kind of it happening in this nether realm of 83% that you have no idea what's going on. And then the other thing that we found that was interesting was that they're looking at how you deal with your customers. And so they also said that's a deciding factor, which over 90% of buyers said they were looking at how that interaction happens. So that was my point about, you really want to make sure that you have a public area, because if they're not going to see it on your space, they're going to find it out at Reddit or at some other, third-party area that maybe you don't even have availability or visibility to and not know. And I know a lot of times people will go, well, Adrian, like, what happens if people are negative on our platform? We don't want to have negativity. I'll tell you, the negative conversations are happening anyway. So would you rather you're aware of it and be able to address it, or be aware of what the customer's up to and what purchases they've made and kind of have that conversation? Or would you rather just be some random face that's on YouTube and you don't know who it is, their email, or what they bought from you? I know I personally would want to know. And then finally, we also know that when customers are doing their research, there is a majority of folks that have an expectation of looking at how you do support. And customers overwhelmingly prefer self-support and have it as an expectation. In 2022, if you're not doing some sort of self-support, and when I mean self-support, I'm talking about community specifically, and we've defined that in the questions that we asked, because we're not talking about ticketing, because that's not self-support, right? You're sending an email off that goes into NetherRealm. We're talking about an opportunity where people can read either a knowledge base or some kind of chat bot where it answers, or community where people can go in and have that conversation with their peers and have that conversation. So I wanted to kind of give you an example of someone that I thought was doing a pretty good job of it. And so that's our friends at F-Secure. So in terms of conversion, 25% of their new business came from community folks that were not currently buying a particular product that they already had. So we find that what ends up happening within the community, people have this ability to discover and see new things that maybe they weren't aware of. We've had one customer, because of their community, was able to convert over 1 million freemium users to paying customers. We saw one customer, after implementing community, 140% increase in conversions year on year. So we know community works for conversion if done properly. And I want to tell you some of the things that you can do to make that happen. So basically, there's 3 things to consider. What we have to remember is the buyer journey is not linear. It's also not one size fits all. So you want to consider various segments and needs. So how do you take action? First, you want to consider how and who responds, within your community. So don't leave like an intern to respond to angry customers. Make sure it's someone who's a professional that has guidelines, training, and knows how to escalate. You want to make sure that your frontline folks that are responding. I think that's why people get nervous about being public, because like, well, what if something happens there? Make sure you have your best people answering that. Understand the buyer journey is not linear, so consider various segments and needs. We know from the world of advertising that relevance leads to more neural engagement and better recall. So consider the personas of the folks you want to convert and create the content that they need, so it's relevant and they're seeing it in that way. And then to that end, and a tad controversial for some in the community space, marketing the community is fine when valuable and relevant. What gets people in trouble is when they spray and pray and they cause these, they started, putting tons of marketing messages around and kind of drowning out the conversation. But if you do it properly, it can be really good. John, I want to pass it to you with any insights you have on this.
Well, I think what people need to understand is that the marketing and sales process has dramatically changed with the shift to the cloud. And most of TSI's audience is in services, and we don't always spend a lot of time thinking about the marketing and sales process. But we recently did a webinar with our partner MarketBridge, and they said that 60% of B2B marketers are now shifting away from CIO and executive buyers and focusing on line of business buyers, because you can buy a subscription under your monthly budget. So you don't have to go through that huge approval for that multi-million-dollar upfront purchase. We're also seeing that more than half of our members now have a freemium sales model, and this is targeting individuals who are looking for some way to make their life a little easier, streamline whatever it is that they do for a living, and they're out trying these freemium tools. And I guess the bottom line is people are doing a huge amount of the research in the sales process, and they never contact a sales rep until the last 10% when they're ready to sign. And the community has such a powerful opportunity there. You said in your opening that you're number 4 on what is a community. It creates a sense of belonging and people who have a genuine interest in supporting, assisting, and learning from each other. That is a very powerful sales tool because line of business buyers and individual contributors want to be a part of something bigger. They're not just looking for a technology provider. They're looking for a community that is going to help them be successful. And we also know that buyers and customers are much more, they will believe what their peers say more than anything you say. So all the ROI calculators and documented case studies on your website do not carry as much weight as reading community conversations about, wow, this is how much we saved, and this is how quickly we got ROI, and this is how we rolled it out and was able to get rapid adoption. So, I agree with you that the few companies, it's only 34%, the last time I surveyed, still have the entire community locked behind. You have to be a customer with an active maintenance agreement to register and get access to the community. And, for those third of companies out there, you're really getting in the way of selling your technology and supporting all of these people doing these freemium trials because they've got the classic support use case. They're in using the product and they're trying to figure out how to use a feature. They can go to the community and find that. So, I think the more we can do to open up more of the community, encourage these conversations about adoption and value and outcomes received is going to be a huge assistance in the sales process and hopefully start boosting those freemium conversions, which are averaging around 4 to 6%, which is not very good. But if they find a community that embraces them, is supporting them, they know if they roll this technology out enterprise-wide, there's going to be a lot of assistance from the peers out there to make them successful. I think it's just a critical part of the whole, land motion.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's kind of what we're end up seeing too, is that obviously the community has that important aspect of it. And I think people get a bit hung up on hiding content because they get nervous, but there's so much content. Sometimes I'll have a customer and I'll do like an audit. I'm like, well, why is that private? I mean, there's certain things that just don't need, it's just generic questions. Like, how do I do X in my career? Like, how is that something that's so secretive that you wouldn't want someone to be like, oh, this tool can help me do better in my job? Yeah, I should buy it.
Or conversations about bugs because they don't want buyers to know that there are bugs in their software. Let me tell you, everybody knows there's bugs in the software. And it's more empowering to a buyer to see that you're acknowledging the issue and quickly resolving it than blocking it away, pretending that there are problems, because that's just a crazy expectation to have.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, I understand some companies want to hide bugs. I get that. But if they see that you're responsive and you're engaged in the conversation around it, and if people can't find the bug, because I think you've said this before, John, I've heard you talk, like Google's the ultimate help desk. I mean, people will go search Google about the bug, and if your community's hidden, it's not getting crawled by Google. So they'll end up on a spot that's talking about the bug, and it may not be such a favorable spot for that conversation to be happening. And you would much rather have on your domain that conversation happening there, where you can be like, yes, we're addressing it and we're aware and we're working through it, as opposed to maybe maybe even a competitor's website, or something of that nature. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead to everyone's favorite topic, which is retention, because everyone loves to keep customers, right? That's an important aspect of keeping people happy. I think like, what's the old saying? It's easier to keep a customer than to get new customers, right? And the other thing that, I think there was some interesting research that ended up seeing from Bain and Company was that a 5% increase in customer retention can increase profitability by 75%, which, I mean, that tells you alone why, retention is something that you want to be focused on. And what was interesting, and we were just talking about this, John, about feedback. So I did a study earlier this year about feedback, and we found that 71% of customers are more likely to stay when a company offers a space for feedback. Just a place where people can come and have that conversation and connect with others and talk about the product. Because the key aspect of it, I won't go deep into the research here, but the key that came out of the research was that people wanted to have that sense of belonging, of being heard, and that communication was happening, and that people felt that they weren't wasting their time. And so having that kind of connection with the company was an important aspect of it. Regardless if the feedback was, taken in, it was the most important thing was that it was acknowledged. And that's the key thing. It's about closing the loops. And, people can bring forward feedback, but it's also the importance is that you're saying, hey, we hear your feedback and we're going to try and do something with it. And maybe you have some, here's what came of it. We weren't able to do this. We were able to do that. They're not looking for people to accept all the feedback, but they're looking for the acceptance of it, the fact that it's understood that you're giving it. And then the other thing that we found, which was really interesting, is that creating a community of peers was an important aspect of building product confidence. And, having confidence in the product and feeling good about your purchase is a way that you retain people. If they're feeling that the purchase was a good idea and they're confident in it and they're getting quick time to value, then people are less likely to churn out than if they're kind of just thrown into the pool and say, hey, good luck, and try to figure it out. And then the most important thing I would say about all of this, and we found this out in a study a couple of years ago, which is that people have told us that, and I want to say, I should have put the number here, but it's over 70% of that. People said, if you're going to do a poor job at this customer experience, self-serve kind of idea, don't bother at all, because it's actually more frustrating. And I just wanted to have that kind of as a call out, as a consideration, that if you're, you can't kind of half do things, don't do anything by half measure. Like, either you're going to offer that experience of community and connection and building it, then if you create some kind of frustrating aspect where they, and people say, like, what do you mean by frustrating? I'm not going to call out a customer, not a customer, but a brand of any kind. But I can probably, and nod your head, John, if you know what I'm talking about, is there's all these companies sometimes they'll have multiple logins for each of their tools, and you can't remember, oh, like, I want to open a ticket and I have that login and I have a login for here, and it's like you send a ticket and it's like, oh, you're in the wrong spot. Like, I actually had I was calling for insurance on the weekend, and it took me 5 calls to get through, because I was like, oh, you're in the wrong department. It was kind of such a frustrating experience. I was like, I'm just I actually didn't even bother getting a quote from them. I just crossed off my list and went elsewhere. So it's a really important aspect of whatever you're going to build. So I wanted to kind of call that out. And, keeping a tradition, I want to talk about a customer that's doing it really well. So Xometry is a very interesting company. They actually just went public, I think, last year. And they are double the NPS of the industry average. And the reason they are is that they have this amazing job that they've done of keeping people happy through content programs and a wealth of knowledge for all the different types of persona that are in the manufacturing space. They have a tight integration with their KB and their community. And essentially, if you're in the manufacturing space, you're going to end up on this community. So they're a virtual manufacturer that you can get pretty much anything done. Like, they can even do, essentially, it's a marketplace that you can find people to do things. So, like, for I had a friend of mine that ordered from them like a plate for their fireplace they needed to have done. They found someone on there. They did like a one-off. It's a fantastic thing. But the point is, they've created this great experience through content, through connection, through personas, and building it all the way to keep people engaged with a regular content program, which is the main thing. If you go on there, they have like videos and learning, I think it's like Learning with Luke and various other things. So I want to make sure I kind of touch on, how do you take action with retention? What are those things that you need to be aware of? So first, you want to have a conversation with actual community members, and it has to be value focused. What's in it for them, and how are you going to make them more successful? I think the biggest mistake I've seen in my over 10 years doing this is that so many times brands will come to me and say, I'm building this community and this is what's going to happen and this is what's going to happen and we're going to do this and we're going to do that and they're going to do, and it's like, did you talk to anyone in the community? Is this actually what they want? Is, you know, are you helping them solve for what their needs are and what they're trying to achieve in their career or whatever they're trying to do? So you want to think about that. And spaces to connect with peers is essential. So, you know, what they do really well at Xometry, and I've seen this work really well, is they just create spaces for an ability for connection, be it virtual or in person, you know, like hourly calls, cocktail hours, user groups at various events, you know, like we're going to be at, you know, in Vegas, TSIA. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of companies that are going to have like little meetups of their user groups. Like that kind of thing is really important. The other thing too is regular content and program assessments focus on the journey. So you want to look at your personas. I always talk about the, you know, holistic persona. It's really important to me that people consider that your marketing team probably has a persona. How are they engaging with the community? What are the things that you're doing? And what are those programs that you can build that builds those habits and creates value so people want to come again and again? And then finally, you want to test, and adjust toward an outcome. So either you're going to continue with what you're doing, you're going to modify what you're doing, or you're going to cancel. It's not set and forget. Don't just set these programs and just hope for the best. Look at how you're going to look them through. And then we get to the final category that everyone loves, which is loyalty. So loyalty, here are some things that I want to point out in terms of considerations. 43% believe being recognized and rewarded is an important aspect to customer experience. So almost half, with others having a feeling it's a bit important to, it's enough for us to pay attention. This is in some research that we did. So we recognize that people love to be rewarded, and that's an important aspect. We learned that 58.8% are more likely to join a community that has a loyalty program. So obviously it's an important aspect to, having that engagement that happens in there. And almost 85% agreed that a community loyalty program had a positive effect on the view of the company. So that if someone sees that there is a loyalty program and it's part of it, it's something that's actually a positive. And most importantly, its impact for your business growth. And the reason I say that is because 80.4% are more likely to be a referenceable customer if they're recognized for their contribution to the community, which to me is right there is a reason to have a program to be, because I mean, I don't know about you, but I always hear people talking about how do I get more referenceable customers, right? And it's just by identifying those people that are doing great jobs, recognizing them for what they're doing, and kind of bringing them on the way. So I know we're tight on time, so I'll just pop here to an example that I really love that you can check out, which is Qualtrics, and they already had one of the best super user programs out there with various levels of participating. They recently revamped it based on feedback from their community, and it's just more than just rewarding people for doing it. It's about surprising those who do, and it's also helping them to be better at what they do. So if you go look at their website, they have higher levels that include free certification bundles, opportunities for mentorship with their data scientists, and much more. So you're giving your valuable time to the community, but in turn the rewards are not only swag like t-shirts and buttons and things, but are opportunities for professional advancement. And it's been really well received by their community. So I just want to kind of put that in people's brains. I know that we don't have enough time to go deep into that, but I just want to point out, you don't need to just do things with pencils and free t-shirts, but there's opportunities where you can have certifications or access to product management or mentorship programs and all kinds, access to executives. There are things that you can do in the community that will provide value. So how do we take action? So there's basically three things to consider. You want to consider how you reward. So you want to do a mix of extrinsic and intrinsic. The simplest way to remember this is intrinsic is money, it's rewards, it's physical items and goods. And intrinsic is about rewarding people for their love of just, they're doing it because they care and they want people to share. So like I think of TomTom as an example. They don't really have a super user program where they're giving people stuff. They give people access because they just love navigation and they want to share. And so you also want to think about what's in it for them and what's in it for you. You have to balance the two. If you're just doing about what's in it for you, it'll not work out for you. And then finally, it's never too early to map, but start slow. What does that mean? It means identifying your potential advocates, but understand their needs, wants, before creating a full-blown program to see what attracts them most. And it's okay not to have a loyalty program on day one, but you should start right away about curating that group and identifying those individuals. John, I'll pass it to you if you have any insights on loyalty that you want to take.
Yeah, I'll be quick so we can get in a couple of questions. But when people are looking at renewal, they're trying to determine, did I get value from this technology over the life of the contract? And only 19% of success organizations are doing benchmarking with their customers. So that means for 80% of the companies, it's up to the customer to figure out if they get value. So I think one of the primary ways that you can assist with renewals in the community is encouraging these conversations about how they got value, how they measured value, what metrics changed, what the ROI looked like, because some companies really don't know where to start in building, the ROI model to show that they did get value. Only 30% of our members are dedicating customer success manager time to community moderation, and I think that's going to have to change because the CSM needs to be in there talking to their clients and encouraging these sorts of conversations and asking the probing questions to make sure that you're getting the peer community to provide the data that ultimately other peers need in order to make that renewal decision. So it's just really about expanding the types of conversations and encouraging the content that you really want to see in there, because it's going to be much more powerful seeing your peers talk about value and how excited they are to sign up again for another contract than expecting the CSM to be the salesperson.
Well, those are really good points, and having the CSMs involved is something that we're seeing more and more people do, but certainly it's not happening as much as it can be. So quickly, I'll just say in summary, basically the key takeaways from each area. So from an acquisition point of view, SEO, creating the content that people seek. From a conversion point of view, give them the content they need to decide, bring them across the line, and take a look at how you deal with customer feedback. In terms of retention, think of programming, making it regular and valuable. And then from a loyalty point of view, help them do their job better and reward them, and make it worth their value to putting the time in. If you kind of enjoyed the content here, we have a lot of content on our website, webinars. We did one with John actually too that you could check out, vanillaforums.com/learn, and we have an ebook as well. I also want to mention that we are, or maybe it's in the next slide. Let me go forward. Yay. We are going to be in Vegas. Higher Logic Vanilla is going to be there. CEO, CMO, Chief Customer Officer, myself as well. So please, come on by to booth, I believe it's 109, to come check us out. We'll be there. I'm happy. We'll also have some sessions about community, offering time for consulting with you. You come ask your questions about community. I'll also have some sessions on what is community at our booth. So come check it out. And if anyone has bought the book, I'm happy to sign a copy if they end up bringing it by. But I look forward to seeing all you folks in Vegas. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but I'm happy to take them if there are any.
I'm going to go ahead and squeeze one in here, Adrian. And I will say also, even if we're not able to answer your question here live, we will make sure to follow up with you. So don't let that deter you from popping a question in the Q&A box. So one question actually comes from Nancy, Adrian, and they ask, frequently marketing feels like they own the prospect experience and the public areas are on the .com presence. How do you practically help them see there is a difference between community interaction and prospect marketing?
Oh, that's an interesting question. The thing is this, I don't know, how do I word this? The thing is, a lot of the community departments are in the marketing department as well. And I think that is the conversation that needs to end up happening, is understanding that community is the front door of the experience for your customers. And we don't want, the idea is not to be prospect marketing. It's about creating a great experience, a place where people have a sense of belonging, and creating the connections that matter. And it kind of then flows from there. If you go into the point of view of trying to, quote unquote prospect folks, I think that's where you head in the wrong way. At the end of the day, we always want to think about what's in it for them and why are people spending the time to come into this space and have this experience. And then from that will flow all the other things that you're looking to do. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, very well said. And with that, we are done with today's webinar, and I'd like to give just a few quick reminders before we sign off for today. There will be an exit survey at the end of the webinar. If you could please take a few minutes to provide your feedback on the content and your experience by filling out that brief survey. A link to the recorded version of today's webinar will be sent out within the next 24 hours. I'd now like to take this time to thank our presenters, both John and Adrian, for delivering an outstanding session. And thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's live webinar, How to Create an Outcome-Focused Community Journey, brought to you by Technology and Services Industry Association and sponsored by Higher Logic Vanilla. We look forward to seeing you at our next TSIA webinar. Take care, everyone.